This is the Infinite Podcast with me, Ulf Tønneflittig.
And me, Øystein Rabbe.
We boldly venture into the unknown to uncover the greater truths about ourselves and everything.
About life.
About life. And we share it with you, our listener.
Yes.
This episode is a great episode.
Yeah, I think you like this episode, Ulf.
I love this episode.
I love your enthusiasm about this guest.
We
finally
got to meet Rabel and have him as a guest on our podcast. I think that's...
we actually drove for 8 hours, or 6 to 8 hours.
Well, counting breaks, 8 hours, just to get to meet Rabel.
This guy.
And it was divine.
It was amazing.
And
I got to ask some really inspiring questions. So
and I got to meet Rabel and also ask him some... Talk to him about some really interesting stuff. Enjoy this episode.
Enjoy.
Rabel on the Infinite Podcast.
There we go.
Here we are.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I've been dying to meet you for like how many years? Quite a few, actually.
And now here we are.
And here we are.
Here we are.
Fantastic.
Welcome to the podcast. So I was thinking on the drive over, which was a fairly long drive, that one sort of angle into our conversation would be talking about the Bible. Mm-hmm. Because, well, for one, you seem to be fairly well traveled in the biblical scriptures from listening to your podcast. And I, from personal reasons, used to hate the Bible, read the Bible just to mock it.
Sure.
And obviously that's all shifted quite a bit. And I have you to thank for that. Which... it still baffles me because I read the whole thing, and it was I would swear there was nothing there, and I was fuel to the fire for like my call it hatred towards religion, and like proof positive that this was just some scheme, or I don't even know what to call it. So it was when you started talking about like the beautiful stuff in there, I just was like to open it up again with what? Did we read the same thing? Which we did.
That's a fantastic opening to a podcast. We're nowhere near a question, and I love it. Just keep going.
So this is not an interview podcast. This is a conversational podcast. And obviously a me praising you podcast. No, I'm kidding. So when I heard you came here, I was like, well, obviously we need to go watch Everything is Spiritual. Because I think that and you and Pete Holmes together is like the top two things I'd ever go watch right now. And then I was like, but we have to get him on the podcast.
It was fairly easy.
It was fairly easy. But still, you have like this picture of this, it's someone you never met. They want to talk to you. I find it still interesting how I was like, what if he doesn't want to talk to us? I was like, but he's one of our guys. We're fine.
Yeah.
When did you first read the Bible? To make it into a question.
I can remember my parents would take us to church when I was a kid, so I guess I would have heard it then, and I didn't. The larger thing wasn't that compelling, but I always found the Jesus stories fascinating.
Yeah,
I found they always seemed to be way more dangerous than the institution and the thing that had built up around him.
Yeah.
And Daniel in the lion's den and Elijah. So I guess those stories as a kid, and my parents had Bibles around. I remember my dad reading the Bible, maybe at like dinner time or something. There'd be like, the Jesus stories I did, they resonated at some level. Like the fact that in the stories when there's somebody who's pushed to the edges, he always brings them in. That there was this establishment, and he was subverting the establishment. Something at like a heart level was like, oh, I get that. Or the fact that growing up, your whole world is ranked. Like they're the best students, there's the best athletes, there's the kids who are good at music, they're the cool, popular kids. So I just lived in a world where everything was ranked. And I remember the first will be last. Those the Jesus stories seemed to be about some other way to see the whole thing. And that was like really helpful. It's almost like, hey, there's a matrix. You know what I mean? Hey, there's a system and you don't have to buy into it. So for me, it had like it's like rebellion or subversion. Just a little bit like, hey, you don't have to trust this whole thing that's telling you these are the rules.
Yeah.
There may be other rules. You know what I mean? But
totally.
So I would say that, and I didn't have that we weren't part of like a denomination or a catechism or like a specific system. So I didn't grow up in any sort of like where you got examined or you had to go to a class or you were, some people have like we were Catholics, we were Methodists, we were whatever. I didn't have any of that. In fact, I got all the way to seminary. When I applied and went to seminary, they had like a list of denominations to you're supposed to check, like what your Team Jesus was. And I remember at the very, very bottom there was undenominational, but there was also non-denominational. Apparently even that was like a distinction. I remember sitting there thinking, I'm or non-denominational. I can't even make those distinctions. But the Bible didn't. So it was just sort of. I guess it's like the most important book. Whatever the answer is, But it wasn't until. And I was like a pastor. And I was a couple years into being a pastor when it suddenly became something else. And it was all because a couple of people started sending me these little photocopied articles about Hebraic thinking, Jewish thinking.
Oh, yeah.
And they were like, no, you don't understand this. And a guy had come up to me after one of my first sermons, and he said, you missed it. You missed the whole thing. And I was like, what are you talking about? And he said, no, you realize that sermon that you just gave about Jesus, you realize he's a first century Jewish rabbi. So when there are 4 cups at the table at a Passover Seder, he would have picked up which cup? He picked up the 4th cup? Well, you know what that means. And when he's talking about, Hillel and Shammai, because there were 2 massive rabbis before Jesus, and when Jesus was asked that question, he's essentially saying, do you stand with Hillel or do you stand if you don't know who Hillel and Shammai is, you're going to miss that whole thing. It was like a whole, you know what I mean? It was like wait,
there's a whole frame of reference that...
Right, that this came from somewhere. That real people in real places in real times. So going back to what you were saying about reading the Bible, if you just pick it up and read it, I mean, people do have powerful experiences, but without just a little bit of what's going on here, it does look like gibberish. But you just get like a little, it's like if you came in late to Game of Thrones. You're like, who's this guy? And you're like, oh, wait, that's Stannis Baratheon. Oh, all of a sudden, you know what I mean?
Well, I have to confess, haven't watched Game of Thrones.
You're fine.
But you watched Game of Thrones.
You're fine.
One thing that comes to mind when you talk about growing up with the Bible, and like I grew up with Sunday school.
Yeah.
My family wasn't particularly Christian or anything. They just did the right things,
Yeah.
In that direction. And I remember the stories, and I remember I enjoyed the stories, and I probably learned a lot from the stories as well. But at some point, it became this kind of pressure from the outside.
Correct.
Do you believe it's true or not?
Right, which is the oddest, is the singularly oddest question.
Yeah.
Like it's even the wrong categories. Like, do you believe it's true? Well, is your marriage winning? I mean, it's not even, and that's not because that's devaluing the truth. That's just, it's so much bigger and more profound and dangerous and poetic and disruptive than like, it's, yeah. So I think a lot of the ways, or you think about how many people, if we were to take apart your cell phone and show you like the insides of your cell phone, and I would say, well, explain to me what these little things do. I don't know. I mean, like, somebody must know. So it's funny with the Bible that people are like, you should just be able to open it and understand it all completely.
Yeah.
Instantly, when everything that matters in life, across the board, takes a while.
It does take both
and
practice and
it doesn't mean you can't have an
tutoring,
experience. It doesn't mean you aren't having experiences right away, but like, you would learn in it, and you would become more like Shakespeare. You would become more familiar with it, and the more familiar with it, the more you'd hear things you didn't hear before.
Yeah.
It's funny sometimes when I hear dismissals of the Bible, I think that's like a 6-year-old dismiss. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's funny. You don't do that with other things. I don't know what's going on here in this movie. Well, you came in at the hour mark. You know what I mean? You don't do that in other parts of your life.
Yeah. Well, so obviously I read the Bible hating religion.
Oh, well, there you go.
So
that tends to color it.
that gave it quite the
yes.
The vengeful God became quite the the cushion,
right.
and the ambiguous words of Jesus became more of a, I guess, provocation or something like that.
Like a weapon. It gets weaponized.
Yeah, but it was way over my head. Like it just, for me, it was like, okay, so this is like an ancestry book with some grotesque stories intertwined.
Right.
And the whole like right and wrong and like the justification of this and that just didn't make any sense.
Right.
Like, because everyone was referring to the Bible, and I was like, but everything's, you can take anything out of this.
Yeah, right.
But like the first time I heard you talking about the Bible, you just brought the whole third perspective in, and I was like, but that's insane. It's like a treasure in there that just was way past me.
I have that to this day. To this day, I will stumble across something in the Bible and think, that's in there? Like, if people knew that, or even I just did this whole thing on the book of Leviticus, and how one of the central ideas of the book of Leviticus is a proper relationship with the earth. And that economy, culture, everything that matters is connected with human beings having a right relationship with the soil. And if human beings get out of sync or out of whack with the earth, then all of culture, your whole society will essentially begin to unravel.
Yeah.
I mean, this is like a basic idea in the book of Leviticus, and like 9 people know it, apparently. Which is just, it's just fascinating. So I went through a whole period where I was like, I'll forget this. I am, like in the 80s, there was an Exxon oil spill off the coast of America where an oil tanker crashed and it killed all these things. I mean, there were times when I felt like I was an Exxon salesman. Like, hey, do you want to buy stock in this company that everybody hates? I mean, I had had times when I was like, people have such giant preconceived notions of this. I mean, let alone you think about words like Christian or God or whatever. I mean, I had periods where I was like, forget it. It's like, there's just so much cultural, like a film over people.
Yeah.
Might as well just I'll just go talk about positive things that nobody can argue with. But I noticed when I would do that, like, I'm just going to talk about, just forgive people. Just forgive. That it's almost like, maybe it's just what I'm here to do, but it was missing something. But I noticed, especially when I was in places where people had no religious background or had wanted nothing, when I would just say, actually, there's an ancient letter that talks about this paradox. It's in the New Testament. I remember doing an event, you know Deepak Chopra?
Yeah.
I remember doing an event at his resort and doing a whole thing on what the scriptures say about this idea of spirit. and his audience is like, they're fantastic, but they're sort of like chilling out on yoga mats, like bring it. But it's time and time again in settings that weren't like Bible, religious, whatever settings. I would just talk about, there's this ancient story that I think is really compelling, and people love it. This has been my experience. Is people have no problem with the Bible. They're actually riveted, and I had a number of friends who have zero sort of church background who are like, hey, that Bible stuff, it's great. You should stick to that. So now I do. I have been for a while. It's really, really enjoyable.
I sometimes feel like you're bridging religion over into spirituality, like everything is spiritual.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that sort of resonates with you, but like for me, my spiritual awakening was sort of coming not into religion,
right?
But once that sort of, I opened that door because I came from a very atheist background,
mm-hmm.
so it was very like science was everything.
Yes,
and it was my God. And obviously with some emptiness inside, which I sort of, I stumbled upon the here and now, the present moment, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, where I'd been living in the future or past before then. So I was like, what's this place? Because it was so vibrant and alive, and I was like, where'd this come from?
Mm-hmm.
And at that sort of same time was when I started listening to you.
I love how you put that.
And it sort of just gave me the smooth transition into sort of going from hating religion very like almost violently, not within words, because I was very hateful or dismissive or like speaking down to religious people, because I felt it was a hoax. It was fooling people. Like all this talk about something bigger than yourself, the afterlife, and
were you a very curious person?
I am very curious.
Okay, so when was your first experience of religion?
Well, so I guess my first experience of the religion was as a kid.
Yeah.
With my grandmother.
Yeah. When was your first negative experience?
Well, that's like a bit harder because I didn't really grow up that religious.
Mm-hmm.
But somewhere along the line, I ended up hating religion quite, thoroughly.
And why is that?
Well, we've been debating it a bit on the podcast, and I can see in my lineage, my grandfather grew up very religious,
mm-hmm.
and my great-grandfather on that side was fire and brimstone religious.
Okay.
So there is elements in my family's history, but I can't pinpoint in my growing up a point other than I guess I felt the absence of a God, or I remember as a kid when I realized people die, that it felt like such a atrocious thing.
Yeah, right.
What's going on here? Just people getting taken out, and then what's going on over here?
So you're a very curious person and a very honest person, and something about how religion was presented to you told you those weren't that sense of abyss, that sense of the emptiness of life, that sense of something about that way that you, watch what we're going to do here. It sounds like something about the way that religion was presented to you said no. It was actually asking you to deny your very real experiences of the world. And so for you, it was like, if this means denying who I am, then I want nothing to do with that. So it isn't religion. It was very personal.
It was very personal.
Very personal. Which is really interesting, because imagine if somebody had said early on, hey, there's this collection of Psalms in the middle of the Bible, these prayers, and probably half of them are laments. They're mourning the loss of innocence, their anguish. What if somebody had said to you, on the cross, Jesus says, my God, why have you forsaken me? It's the day that God became an atheist. So Imagine if somebody had said to you, a healthy, vibrant spiritual vision for life includes doubt, angst, loss, the abyss, the dark night of the soul, the denial. If you really want to take God seriously, then there's space for the denial of God. That's all part of it. Like, so what if somebody had said to you at an early age, all these things that you're feeling are totally legitimate. They're all part of the human experience.
I think, or I know, that life would be very different.
Yeah.
Like,
so
because it's fundamentally, I think you're at the core of the thing.
Right. This is not something other than the fullness of what it means to be human.
Yeah.
And somewhere along the way, for obviously tens of millions of people, when they hear religion, they don't think, oh yeah, the full depths of the human experience.
It's the whole thing.
Offered up in its complexity, its ambiguity, with this odd trust that something's at work even in all this. I mean, that alone, I instantly go, oh yeah. Now that's actually honest and has some element of hope, but you get there legitimately. Yeah, there we go.
For me, my shift in understanding religion or understanding the Bible was also like, I had been building my career, I had a good company, employees. I was really like trying to build this big
castle
without anything inside.
Right.
But that ultimately crashed. And at some point I started getting like the realization that, okay, I need to find something within me. Not
yeah.
And then I found someone talking about Christianity and spirituality in the same context.
Yes.
And it's like, it was suddenly like, instead of having 3 different maps that didn't link together, everything became one map.
Right.
And then I started, this I can do. Like I started being able to explore myself.
Yeah.
Because I didn't have all these separate maps.
Right.
And that was a huge shift. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. That's what happened to me when I stumbled into quantum physics and atoms and particles. And what little I could understand that I was reading, the whole thing is energy and relationships, and an atom is a relationship of energy.
Yeah.
And atoms don't follow any of the rules, that there's a weirdness baked into creation, that the whole thing, even solid matter, is ultimately energy and relationship. It fundamentally, all of a sudden, there's just one world.
Yeah.
There's just one thing. And people are coming at it from different angles, but it resonated to me. It resonated so true. Like, the whole thing is a relationship. A series of... I knew that, kind of. I felt that, and now I have language for it.
Yeah. Then also all the languages and all the images and all the pictures and all the understandings just becomes, ways to understand.
And it totally makes sense.
Instead of
human
truths,
beings.
like this is...
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So painting, cave paintings in quantum physics, and building a business because you want to like make something, all becomes like, of course.
Yeah.
Of course humans beings do this. Your company had to fall apart.
Yeah, I love that experience now. Like I needed it.
You would not believe how many people I've gotten to talk with all over the world who the story always goes, I set out to do this thing. And it generally involves words like best, biggest, successful, and then it fell apart, and then my life began.
Yeah.
I mean, again, that's so many people.
That's quite the hero's journey.
That's how it works. Right.
That's how it works. Yeah. I was going to be the greatest editor of all time. The best. It's going to be the finest film editor you could ever find. Then it just crashed into the ground.
Yeah.
And I couldn't be happier.
And now you couldn't be happier.
I remember I was doing this mundane job, or this editing job. I was like, I can't do it anymore. And my wife was like, well, just stop. You don't have to. And when I called the client, I was like, I can't do it anymore. I cried because I was so relieved, because I was telling the truth. I was liberated. It was like the best feeling at the same time a very frightening feeling, because all of a sudden playing field was open. Because prior to that I was sort of playing to the notion that, well, all I can do is edit. That's how can I choose a different path? My path has been chosen now. So I was felt like locked in.
Yeah.
But then when I sort of just said no, all of a sudden it's like open sky. And it was it amazes me how on like the bottom of the downfall is the
absolutely
is the rebirth.
Absolutely. That's
and then someone writes a book about it like thousands of years ago and just tries to sort of wrestle with it and elegantly put it into the world.
Yeah. Yep.
That's pretty cool.
Very cool.
But so you've been a pastor for a church. Are you still a pastor?
What a great question. If you need me to be, sure. It's interesting.
What is a pastor?
We started. I worked in a church, and then my friends and I, and my wife Kristen, we started a church. So I did that for a number of years. So that was like in an actual town, and there were Sunday services, and there was all that sort of thing. So for some people, that word only refers to like a building and a time and a place. So I don't do it like that anymore. But I'm having more fun than ever.
I know. Obviously, I listen to your podcast, so I know a lot of your stories. So it's, but I still find it so amazing how you make life so alive within like both its limitations and its possibilities, and you're so honest, like about the whole taking breaks, like honoring the stopping
the rhythms built into everything.
It's really helpful for me.
Yeah. Well, you all certainly seem to understand that better in Norway than Americans.
Yeah, we got the seasons, they give us.
Yeah.
Well, I guess most of America do as well, but they do help quite a bit with the rough winters and the
nature forces some rhythms on you all.
Yeah.
What's been some of your kind of big experiences in terms of your own developments, communicating to people or sharing the good news, as you say?
Oh man, there's been so many. I mean, there's been so many moments.
Yeah.
When I had like,
I know that.
So I mean, I can think of a number. I can think of them from like all across.
Yeah.
My life. I mean, I think of just recently. We're in July, April. I'm with a friend of mine in New York, and she is an actor and director. And she had just seen last year's tour when I was in New York doing the show. So this is the kind of thing. She said, we were talking about how like this tour that I did last year called The Holy Shift. It sort of builds and builds and builds. It's about an hour. It was about an hour and 45 minutes long. And at the end, all the different pieces start to come together, and you can see the crowd go. And I would see this every night, all year long at the tour. Like, people go, all these different pieces start to like come together, and there's like a moment. And so this is an example of my friend Cheryl says, Rob, I know that people think that was the payoff, like the boom, the bang, the reveal. She said, but the problem with that, she says, is it implies that you know something that we don't. And so what you did for an hour and 40 minutes is you like put out these breadcrumbs, and we followed them, and at the end there's a feast. But she said that it implies that you knew something, and then gradually you were revealing it to us. She says, I don't come to your show because you know something I don't, and you're going to take your time and you're going to show it to me. She said, the whole thing is payoff. She said, I go to watch you discover it yourself. And I get to join you in discovering it. So she says there is no payoff.
Yeah.
There is all of us together seeing it and exploring it and learning it. So that's like a subtle...
Yeah,
that
like
is real subtle.
Or like I can go back then, that was 2000. That was in April, so 2019. I can go back to 2008 because when I came up, like I studied to be a pastor, and then I worked in a church, and then I started a church. And when I would interact with other pastors, the thing that I would pick up. So this was like 10, 11 years ago. Feels like another lifetime. But what I picked up over time was, your job as a spiritual leader is people are here, and your job is to bring them to here. So and there was always some new adjective to help people be more open, more familiar with the latest scientific discoveries, more environmentally conscious, more oriented around issues of justice and poverty, more like there was always some new word that was like, oh, this is the thing. I got to get these people. You know what I mean? And I got to move them from point A to point B, almost like you think spatially. They're in this space, and my job is to get them here. And it's very subtle, but it got revealed to me. And I had a whole series of experiences in the summer of 2008, and this priest in Dublin confronted me, and he said, it was like he just shook his head. He's like this wise old priest, and he says, no, it's just a big, generous gift. And it was we were walking in this rose garden. I'll never forget it. Like, it was like, he essentially was like, no. You just give a big, generous gift. The biggest gift you can give. That's what you do.
Yeah.
And I had like a massive moment of transformation. Like, because I know if somebody wishes I was in some other place, you know what I mean? When someone comes and knocks on your, I don't know if they do it here, if someone knocks on your door because they're trying to get you to join something or say, you're instantly defensive. What actually moves you and draws you and compels you is somebody who in freedom and liberation and joy just does what they're doing. And you are like, it's like you're pulled into it. But that happened in the summer of 2008. I went 4 months with no sermons and no public speaking. I took 4 months of no doing what I do because it was such a traumatic break of wait, I have to rethink. And when I came back, it was like the only thing to do is just give the most buoyant, honest, joyful gift you can give. That's the only thing left to do.
Yeah.
So that's like why I laugh on the podcast is, so I think I laugh because I might be starting to get it. I always say blessed is the one who's in on the joke. Like we're on a floating ball of rock hurtling through space at 67,000 miles an hour. Like this whole thing is ridiculous. Yeah. Or you think about the Jesus parables, where people show up at different hours to work in the vineyard, but then they all get paid the same. Or this guy, everybody hates him, and he's so short he has to climb a tree to see Jesus, and Jesus says, everybody in town hates you, I want to eat at your place. It's almost like over and over again, Jesus is going, are you starting to get it? Because I'm doing really weird stuff here. You know what I mean?
I know.
Everybody shows up at different times, but then I'm going to pay them all the same. Like, that's weird. Yeah. Or the parable of the prodigal son. This begins with the son saying to his father, I want my share of the inheritance, which in a first century Mediterranean culture meant that the inheritance was divided when the dad died. So the parable begins with the son, and you would never speak disrespectfully to a patriarch, but the parable begins with the son saying, Dad, I wish you were dead. And the father gives him his share, which was this, I can't even, how people would have responded to a story like this. You know what I mean? I
guess they would be like, whoa, or because it's quite an extreme thing to do, like you said. Right,
like if a story began with, ISIS came to my daughter's school, you know what I mean? You would just be like, what is this? What is So over and over again, there's almost like an undercurrent of absurdity to what Jesus is talking about. Grace, love, forgiving your enemies, praying for people who persecute you. There's almost like an undercurrent of absurdity to it that tells me that somewhere the truth is somewhere in there. Or even he keeps speaking almost like an economy of grace, like that when you are generous, you're just playing by different rules than everybody else.
Yeah.
When you think about, if you look carefully at what Jesus keeps saying about money, it's even it's like a different relationship to money. You're holding it with much more of an open palm than like a tight clenching fist, and so that's to me lately, if you ask about like key moments, that is I feel like there's something about the absurdity that's taking me farther into the mystery and the love. So sometimes I'll begin to see something and I'll just follow it, and then years later, like the story I told you, years later I'll be like, oh, that's what was happening then.
Wow. I just feel like that's just the story I needed to hear, you know?
Yeah.
From coming here. Like,
you think about how many people, it's just a heavy, solemn, we have to, there's no imagination. And that's the great gift, is we're all going to die.
Yeah, I've heard.
Maybe soon. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
People get cancer, car accidents. There's like a large portion of the world's wealth is in the hands of a couple of people. Like there is something horrifically uncertain and unstable about all of this. Like, so a moment here and now of peace and joy, inexplicable generosity. Like even the two stories you each have told are like, they're completely ridiculous stories, and you're both like, and then for some reason I got happy. You know what I mean? Like you're when you tell those stories, that's actually the great wisdom. Or like when you were building your company, like, oh, we're gonna strategize and I'm gonna and that's fine if you build a company, but it's almost like you tried that wisdom and it was helpful. It's fine. I mean, we need cars and we need to have someone food. I mean, there's like basics. But it's almost like then you left and went to some other kind of wisdom, which was like, because if you would now go back and talk to your business building self, you'd probably be like, dude, relax. Just relax. You are so wound up. You're taking yourself so seriously.
It just reminds me of all these nights I was sleeping at my job.
Abs, right. This is the life.
So
it is.
You know, because I was reaching this, the smooth place, as we talk about it.
We call it the smooth place. This is what we dreamed of, the smooth place. That's when all your hard work paid off. Finally. Some call it retirement.
The smooth place. As if you live a completely chaotic, unsustainable, insane life. And that will get you to calm and peace.
To the smooth place. Yeah.
That's what gets you there.
Eventually, if you're not there yet,
hard enough.
Yeah, if you're not there yet, you just have to work harder. Then it will happen.
Yeah.
I was looking back at so I moved to Oslo, so I lived in Trondheim. I studied in Trondheim, started a company here in Trondheim, and then I got like a work opportunity in Oslo, and I went to Oslo, the great capital, and started working. And my goal, world's greatest editor, was finally materializing. And I think I worked 24/7, because when I look back at those years, I was always at work. And then I sort of hit the wall in 2006, and I was like, whoa, just gotta work harder then. So I just worked even harder, and the wall got even bigger. And then when I had kids in 2010, or my son was born, it sort of felt like, things are falling into place. Life has meaning now. But it was only sort of projecting that onto something other than myself. I still had to do the editing job, because that was who I was. And then a couple more bumps in the road until I finally caved in and was, I can't do this anymore. And salvation was upon me. And it was it's such an intense and absurd, like you say, it's sort of a cosmic joke. Like I was putting all this effort into what? Just to realize that I was heading in the completely wrong direction. And as we were driving here today, I was like, well, this is an adventure. This is what life is all about. We're just going to meet someone who we never met, who we've heard a lot about, but we're just gonna see what happens, and we're just gonna show up to that,
it's so fun.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking coming down the stairs in the hotel. I'm gonna meet some people I've never met. It'd be interesting. I wonder what they want to talk about. Yeah, that's actually the thing. It's the wonder and awe of your own life that you actually want.
Yeah.
Like, you show me anybody who wouldn't trade whatever money. You need some money, obviously, but then beyond that, like, wonder and awe is what actually people want.
Yeah.
It's some sense of, that's actually what everybody wants.
Yeah.
It's the most valuable thing.
That's true wealth.
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I
also-
just decided to organize my life around that.
Mm.
So Kristen and I just decided that would be a better life, to organize ourselves around a sense of this whole thing is like an adventure that you go on. So let's just keep following it and see where it leads. So at every step, that's just what we do. And it's just so great.
Yeah. That is great.
I believe you said once it's all rigged in your favor.
Ah, yeah.
And I'm just like, yeah.
And for your listeners, it's important. By that, I do not mean like a sort of health and wealth. Hey, you could have a Ferrari too. I mean, the whole thing is rigged in favor of your growth.
Yeah.
And your expansion and the creation of your character and the opening of your heart. The whole thing. So if you see it that way, then when things come your way, and I specifically the difficult things, but if you just go, okay, so what's hiding in this? It just changes everything.
Yeah. I had this friend of mine, Eric, is such a great guy, who talks about everything as an adventure.
Yes.
Like, that's the approach.
Yes.
So it's a quest, it's an adventure.
Yes.
And it just sort of puts a whole different perspective on the whole thing, because if you're taking out the garbage, you're just taking out the garbage. But if it's an adventure, then anything can happen.
Yeah. I go to get the groceries for my family, and I have powerful experiences. Like, we eat, and I go get my kid. Like, I get to provide for these people. What an extraordinary thing. Sometimes I save. My wife makes me the list of things we need, and like that. Sometimes I'll find it in my pocket, like when I put those pants back on, and like I'll have like oh, that's right, there's these people I love, and I get to go get them food. Yeah, like, what an amazing thing.
That is amazing.
It's funny, in every tradition, the wisest, most enlightened person in the village, the village elder, the yogi, the guru, they're never the person, or the person who goes on the great spiritual pilgrimage. They go away for years and they come back down the mountain. They never come back down and bring the great message they've received and say to the village, man, we're screwed. You know what I mean? Or they never come back to the village and say something like, it's way more complicated than I thought. And they generally have something along the lines of love, here and now. We have each other, we're going to be okay. It's generally something very simple. But it almost offends the modern sensibility that sees that as almost insulting. Like, no, it needs to be complicated and hard, and it needs to be, no, it might not be.
I watched the movie Aladdin the other day with my kids.
Oh, yeah. The new one?
The new one.
Yeah. My daughter loved it. We've been listening to that soundtrack every day going to school. Well, I've heard those songs 1,000 times.
But it really, like, and I guess it's the same way in the old film, so that's not to the point, but all that stuff is to get him somewhere, but his true liberation is just by generosity. And it's so simple and powerful. Like, there's no almighty being ever. There is just you being generous towards others, and that really struck a chord with me, being like a very like profound and good message to get across to anyone. Because Jafar, he gets sort of caught up in the business side of things. He wants to build like a big ass castle with lots. He wants to be like the head honcho, and and he just can't stop.
And you know from the beginning he's doomed.
Yeah.
Everybody knows that guy, that's not going to end well.
And then we go back to work and be like, if I just get enough precious gold.
You can, in a movie, you can spot the loser who isn't going to get. And then walk out of the movie theater.
Just go back to being Gollum. It's crazy. But then back to here, I just want to say again how much I appreciate what you're doing.
Oh,
because
thank you.
You're doing it, and it's working, really well.
Oh, that's very kind of you.
I'm still when a meteor hits Earth, and there's but it's not a meteor. It's the word. And as you once taught me, the first thing was the word, and I've been this fantastic book, The Four Agreements, which I've been listening to a lot lately. It's an audiobook, and who's reading it? But he has such a beautiful voice, and that obviously helps. But the power of the word, words are magic. And that just really, they're super powerful, and you have to wield them with responsibility, like you're doing.
You know the great Abraham Joshua Heschel. Have you ever read Heschel?
I have not read Heschel.
Yeah, you would love Heschel. Heschel. You would love Heschel, but he said that words create new worlds.
Yeah.
So somebody says something, it's just them speaking, and yet you suddenly, a whole new thing opens up.
Yeah.
You're like, wait, that's possible? Wait, maybe somebody gives you language for something you've already been feeling, and all they did was just name something, and yet it was I'm not alone, or there's a language for that, or that to this day words have some sort of activating energy.
Yeah.
So in this particular Jewish tradition, when their foundational poem about creation involves speaking, it makes sense.
It does.
It makes sense. And you and I can have all sorts of connection. I kind of know what you're thinking, but then when we give words to it, the words are what connect us.
Yeah. A lot of misunderstandings happens when
right.
assume, other than speaking out loud. I know from a marriage.
Right, and then you think about exactly. So you think about a marriage survives with actions, but then there's lots and lots of words.
Yeah.
So then you think about the Jesus story and how when they're trying to explain this activating energy of the universe, present and intimate among all of us, they talk about the word taking on flesh. And you can think like the readings of the Bible, they're like, well, that doesn't make. They're not. They're talking at such a deeper level of soul, or my wife calls them the lower languages, meaning the things that speak to your depths. They're not pre-rational or irrational, they're trans-rational. Yeah. They include the mind and then go into all these other territories, which is, all great art is at some level trans-rational. Yeah, you can think about it, but it's doing something way bigger than just what your brain can think. What do you think about that painting? I'll tell you what I feel. It makes me quake. It makes my insides hurt. It makes me, or a great song. How do you analyze that song? Oh, I'm already bored. What did it do to you? Oh, let me tell you. So the things that actually move us have this trans-rational dimension that both includes language and goes way, way, way beyond
language.
Yeah. So these images, going back to you sort of reading the Bible with fresh eyes, there's a reason why they use these particular images and analogies and metaphors, and it's because they have enduring resonance. They speak to for thousands of years certain images: water, wind. There's a reason why these are the dominant images. They work. They do something.
They're universal.
Yeah.
Wow.
What's I'm not sure if this is a good question. Your approach to how do you approach life when you don't want life? If you meet obstacles that you no. what is your like approach to?
Oh yeah,
showing
when
up
there's
to
something,
that?
it's like,
Yeah.
I don't want to go through this again.
Yeah, that feeling.
Well, you just begin with honesty.
Yeah.
You just drag up everything that's in there. And then what helps me is to witness to the experience. So you get out all that emotion. Why, I have to see so-and-so. It's going to be, I'm going to hate it. I always, and a friend of mine, this great spiritual guide, she always says, pay attention to what has charge. So, you really don't want to do that? You really hate it? How bad do you hate it? Oh man, I hate it so much. Really? It's really brutal. It's just, you'd rather do anything else? Yeah. Why? Why that? Why that person? There's like 7 billion people on the planet. Why is that person so provoke you? So, why does that have charge? Or why does that photo, here's one. Why does that photo do something in you? Like you see that photo, is it that period of time? What is it about that period of time? Or that person, that person comes up in conversation and something within you is like, that guy, get out of my, right. So that's why I always go, why do I have so much, it's almost like voltage or electricity around this. I'm trying to think, this happened the other day. What was it? Oh, yeah. Something involving one of my boys and this thing we had to do. And it wasn't my son, but it was this other, I was like, why does this thing that we have to go do, why am I so digging in my heels? I'm walking and digging my heels in the same time. And like you just follow it. And it's almost like a muscle you can build up to follow it. Why? Oh, because, what's attached to it? Oh, and what's the fear there? Oh, got it. You don't want to go do that because of a fear that may be X or Y.
Yeah.
And in some ways, that's the real art of it, is you're getting better and better and better at identifying. You're in an argument with your wife, and you're able to go, wait. I said this because of this, because I'm afraid of X. Usually fear is in there somewhere.
Fear is a crucial component, yeah.
And it's like the sooner you can almost see it from outside of it. So like now, you can see the business. And you can go, oh, I was motivated by this. I was fearing this. I was driven by this. I was hoping for this. I was, like you can almost like drone. You're almost flying above it and you can map it. And so the real art of life is to get to where you can do what you can do now with the editing and with the business, but you can do it now in real time.
Yeah.
As it's happening, you're like, ooh, ow, that hurt. Why'd it hurt? Yeah. And that, I mean, when you begin to know yourself or know I feel shame here. Why? Well, let me think.
I think for
and
me,
then now you're liberated at some level.
Yeah.
Now the whole thing really, now you're living that the thing is rigged in your favor, because you're getting closer and closer to laughing in real time. Oh man, I fell for that one again.
Yeah. But I think for me, that whole process is like shame is the most difficult one. Like whenever whenever that shows up in something, it's like
absolutely. Yeah. There's a couple: shame, fear, guilt.
Yeah.
I mean, there's like 4 or 5 that. I mean, you look at all. I mean, psychoanalysts, literature, behavioral science. Like you can go cut across, and there's like what 3, 4, 5 that are like the roots. So on one level, we're infinitely mysterious as human beings, and another level, it's pretty much the same old.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's pretty much the same old stuff.
But it's like, and when I get this realization, like all of a sudden I get it. It's like I also find myself, I knew this for quite a while. I just wasn't ready to admit it to myself.
Right. Yeah, oftentimes. Oftentimes you knew it in your bones. It's interesting, going back to the Psalms, how much of knowledge in the Psalms, when I kept quiet, my bones cried out. In the Psalms, your body, you're all integrated. And your sorrow, your grief, truth. The Psalm writers don't split you up. they speak of you as an integrated being, and your bones are where things get stored.
Yeah.
And that to me is very helpful. To like, yeah, you knew it. It's almost like it existed. If you're listening to the podcast, good luck. It's almost like it existed somewhere in here. Or the Greeks had this word splankton. Splankton is like almost your gut. But for them, that was where compassion comes from. It comes from like the center of your being. Yeah. But it's like you knew these things, but like, I gotta like acknowledge them as true, and then I'm gonna have to like rearrange some things. Yeah. And how often when you do have great bursts of revelation, you're like, oh yeah, I knew that a while ago. I'm just now ready for it. It's like my body was carrying it around going, hey, we're just carrying this around, and whenever you're ready to talk about it.
Yes, it's that word intuition comes to mind.
And I think you're going to see people talking about intuition more and more and more because of some very specific reasons. I think you're going to see that become, in the next couple of years, you're going to see intuition. It's going to have a huge comeback.
Yeah, it's a powerful word.
Absolutely.
And I guess it's a trust or faith, like, because it's not something like, it's very abstract.
Yes.
And the rational mind likes to, make cool diagrams and put things into boxes and make it really neat.
Yes.
But then there's this, I think, like Steven Spielberg said, this quiet little voice in the back.
Yes. Because you have external objectives and you have internal subjectives. Yeah. So there's a dimension to life that is external and it is objective. How tall you are, how much you weigh, your birth date, how much money's in your checking account. Like, these are all things that can be measured in a very external, tangible way. And then you have these very internal, subjective, you're sad. Well, sadness isn't measured like how fast you can run. These are two multiple dimensions of what it means to be human, and they are measured and assessed and experienced in different ways. But the problem in the modern world is the external objective, the birth of the scientific revolution, what we now know about how fast apples fall from trees, built this giant, impressive iPhone, hospital, airport world. Yeah. And so what happened is, in some ways, its accomplishments were so unbelievably impressive. It's almost like drowned out everything else. So you have CEOs who make tens of millions of dollars a year who are so deeply disconnected from. I've numerous occasions been with fantastically wealthy people and just said, "What do you want?" And heard people just say, "I have no idea. I don't even." The number of times I've heard people say, "I don't even know what that even means." But like, if you have when you think about like living from your heart, if you could just go do anything, I have no idea. So they were able, in one sphere of life, to absolutely go to the farthest ends of the earth, and in other dimensions of life, know next to nothing. So I think, like intuition, there are lots of ways we know things, and a whole giant, and universities sort of help spread it in many settings. A whole world sprung up of, if you can't measure it in a lab with concrete data, then it's to be distrusted. Yeah.
It doesn't exist.
And yet for thousands and thousands of years, human beings knew things in all sorts of ways. A friend of mine always laughs and says, for thousands and thousands of years, across all time periods, and people knew that meditation is good for the brain, but then somebody gives a TED talk about, we now have evidence that when people are in meditative states, it's better for their...
Now we can do it. It's quantifiable. It's
so you have
scientifically proven.
So I think we were so in awe of... There's now research for it. Yeah. Like nowadays, you think about how many settings. This is so-and-so, they're a storyteller, whatever. This is so-and-so, they're a poet, whatever. So-and-so, they're a researcher. Wait a second. Give them the micro... You know what I mean? Yeah. Which is great. which is great. But I think you're going to see more and more people going, yeah, the research is great. We also just know. We also just know. We've known for thousands of years.
Yeah.
And it's okay to trust that.
Yeah, it's so funny how when you have like a TED Talk or things like that, that the whole kind of realization that we finally found out this works.
Right. Like, don't make fun of religion. Do not make you lose the right to make fun of religion when you're like, there's research on it. No way. Now we can. You're just. That's fine. It's fine. It's all. I'm totally for it. But just be honest.
Yeah.
It's a faith, and that's great.
That is great.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Fred, to the mic, ladies and gentlemen.
Rob, comedy and the future of comedy. Is there a spiritual component to
Absolutely.
Comedy?
So you keep going. Is that?
Yeah. Because a lot of comedy is about making fun of things that are bad, which is good. A part of the healing process.
Yeah.
But then there's also a cosmic joke here around.
Yeah. Right.
And there's a lot of humor in Zen masters, and you can clearly tell on a master through the way they laugh about things. And maybe there's a different type of humor, maybe not. But you're a comedy fan, and you do work in comedy right now, right?
Oh, I don't know what I call it. My observation, I would say, when a comedian is working redemptively, what the comedian does is we have all these things that you talk about in polite company, but then certain subjects, everybody backs up a little bit, like, well, those. The comedian at the exact moment when everybody goes, I'm kind of back up now. I'm not over. The comedian charges in and goes, why don't you talk about that? Why are you ashamed about that? And it's at some level what the comedian does is take the thing that all the things knocking around inside of all of us, our thoughts, the things we're most embarrassed about, shame, the things that haunt us, and the comedian drags it out into the light with such force and clarity. You're so, in some ways, the shock jolts you, and then you realize you're not alone, but you realize that we dragged the thing that most haunts me, that I'm most terrified of, it got dragged out into the light, and we're all fine. And when the comedian's working redemptively, something really, really, really powerful happens. Something obviously profoundly spiritual. I mean, sometimes the comedian is, like, I was at a show the other night, and the comedians were just making fun, and the show was all about how stupid people are. And they thought it was hilarious. But at some point, it was just mean. It wasn't like, look at us funny humans. It was like, these people are idiots. And they were banking on the crowd joining them in ridiculing these people over here. But what it did, interesting enough, is it made the comedians on stage, it made them look really small. You know what I mean? It's almost like you could feel them shrinking. Yeah. But then I do this show at a club in my neighborhood, and the other night, Sarah Silverman, you know who that is? Yeah. An American comedian. We were chatting backstage, and then she walked out and did like 15 or 20 minutes that was so profound. And everybody was laughing really hard. But if you listen to what she was saying, you could also have said, oh my word, she went out and said things that are so true that not everybody's ready to admit. And she did it, and everybody was laughing. But it was so profound on so many levels. And that, to me, like, it feels like more than ever, the comedians are, like, in some ways, the new prophets, pointing out the things that are
speakers
ridiculous.
Of truth, or like just
and
poking into.
And people have said, like, people have said to my work, like, hey, those jokes, like that funny stuff you did was like a nice addition. I'm like, no, it's not an addition. It's the thing. You know what I mean? The joke isn't the thing so that you can swallow the other stuff. You know what I mean? Like, oh, we'll get you laughing, then you can handle the truth. No, the joke is the truth. When it's done well.
Yeah, it's funny because it's true.
Yes.
And painful.
You're not laughing as like some other thing so that you're like loosened up, so then you're ready to actually... No, you're laughing because you're getting it.
Do you think some particular comedians are working in the direction of
I think
expansion?
Oh yeah, I think what Eddie Izzard. You know Eddie Izzard?
Sorry?
Do you know Eddie Izzard?
I'm not sure. No.
Yeah, he's British. He's
a British one, right?
He's a British one.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know that much about comedy, and I actually don't watch that much. But Eddie Izzard has always been to me just incredibly profound. Yeah. And my wife is always showing me different comedians. She's always got, so she knows way more than me. But and I think you're going to see more and more. And then also I think with things, people being more and more in front of screens, obviously people are watching comedians on screens, but the live event where a comedian's in a room and you're there in the room. There's a comedian named Kate Berlant who's absolutely genius. She does this, I can't even explain it. She does her whole stand-up, at least last time I saw it, she does it like she's a college professor who's completely obsessed with herself, and she speaks in like hyper political correctness. And the audience doesn't know what's happening at first because she just starts talking. And then when like gradually you start so she is like unbelievably brave because she'll go out and start talking in this like manufactured college professor kind of thing. And it's so awkward and stilted, it takes the audience a while to realize what's happening. And then it's like gradually the audience catches up. So she has to be willing to like do a good 5-10 minutes, trusting that the audience, she told me she'll go out into the audience and like tell people that she can tell their futures and she can tell them things about themselves. And then she'll just say things that aren't true, but then pretend like all of her predictions were correct. So at first the audience is like, she's getting it all wrong, like that I'm not. And then she just plows through like she was right. You see what I'm saying? Like it's so avant-garde and sort of, and then the audience, it's like it takes the audience her whole act to catch up. See that stuff like that to me, genius. Absolutely genius. Yeah, so I think you're going to see more and more.
There's something about like the thing you said, the communal thing about the stand-up act where people get together.
Absolutely.
Like in church or even the cinema, which I just
Absolutely.
find this when we gather.
Yes.
Not sit alone in front of screens. There is something bigger than ourselves.
And that's never going to go away. And everybody's saying, no, everybody's going to just spend more time on Netflix. I'm like, okay, for a little while.
Yeah.
But in the end,
there's something
the live
bigger
event,
out there.
Because you want to gather and you want to be in a space where you don't know actually what's going to happen. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I had this aversion against, now it seems like I'm against everything, football, Norwegian soccer, I guess it's called in American. I just didn't like it, and Trondheim is like a big soccer.
Oh, it is?
It has like a football team, Rosenborg, which was like one of the, I guess, best teams in Norway at the time. So everyone went to the stadium to watch the game, and I went a couple of times. I was like, this is not for me. I don't get it. People are just yelling at the umpire and to the team. Everyone seems like they know better than the team what to do, and it all just felt like I felt out of place. And then, after my sort of shift, a friend of mine asked me to come to a football game. And I said, okay, sure. And my best word would be like suspension of disbelief, because when I just joined in, I became 1,000 people chanting for these players down on the field, and we were lifting the players up. And I experienced this transcendent thing where I was a part of something bigger than myself, and I was a part of the game. And it was just so mind-blowing how I was originally just saying, I'm not a part of this. And I wasn't. And it just seemed like nonsense, like with the Bible. And then when I just said, well, let's see what this is all about, and I'm willing to, well, show me what this is, and it
speaks to some place deep within us that wants to belong.
Yeah.
It's very, very normal.
It is, and it's powerful.
Yeah, pre-rational, very hard to explain. It's like pre-verbal. It's hard even to give it language.
Yeah.
Other than it arises something so primal within you, like belonging.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very true.
I guess we're not here to be alone then. This is a group experience.
This is a group experience.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's a good podcast you have here.
Yeah.
Getting better by the day.
You got one more question and one more thing you want to talk about?
Do you have something you want to talk about?
What do you feel?
Oh yeah, Monday night. That's my time to talk about what I'm going to talk about. Of course I do. Yeah?
Yeah. What do you feel people need the most? The people you meet in your work?
Oh. Over and over and over again. I meet people who need to be told that the thing that they're carrying around is totally normal.
Yeah.
I can't tell you. And educated, uneducated, wealthy, not wealthy, traveled all over the world, not traveled, doesn't matter. The number of people I've met who are like carrying around some experience, some sadness, some euphoria, and are like, is it okay that I'm yeah, that's totally normal. I feel like sometimes my whole thing is I just go around going, of course you'd be. In San Francisco a couple nights ago, I have no idea what day it is, it's jet lag. 2 weeks ago in San Francisco, a woman, I was doing a Q&A and a woman just said, my husband committed suicide recently. And then told what that was like. And every single thing she said, so what do you say to that? And I was, that your response is 100% normal. Yeah. Of course you're feeling this, and this. And that, especially if you're talking about like spirituality or God or big words like that, for so many people, what they were handed is a binary of good, bad, success, failure, win, lose, and I got to get it. The company's successful. And so right on the heels of that, it's totally normal is I just begin with the assumption that spirit is in whatever it is, wherever it fits, whatever column you would put it in. And that the way that creation works is something new comes out of even this. So that career didn't go the way you thought it would, that business, and there was something lurking in it, and then out of that something new came. So I always just begin, I'm not there guarantees or promises or how can I make everything go right. Oh, that would be the worst. Talk about hell on earth. No, it's much more interesting how did it go and what was present in it, and it's like tuning your ear to the new thing that's happening in that. And once people move past those old binaries, those dualities of, yeah, but that was bad. Hold on. But you're asking me about it, and it's still with you, and it got you here. And hold on. Let's revisit that. Because maybe there was something in it. That's like the great leap that I see lots and lots of people making. Is even the idea of a God who exists or doesn't exist. Fine, whatever. You got to have your categories, fine. But it's much more interesting. What is this presence in all of it? That's good times.
Yeah.
You can have a podcast about that.
Yeah.
That's infinite.
I believe you nailed it.
Yeah. You've been listening to the Infinite Podcast with
Ulf Tønderflytter
and me, Øystein Rabbe.
Thank you so much for listening, and be sure to subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Spotify.
Yeah. And Yeah, or on Facebook or...
Yeah, follow us on Facebook.
Yeah.
And also, we've now made a Patreon account.
Yes.
So if you like this podcast and would like to support us, go to Patreon and check out our Infinite Podcasts site there. Your support would...
Yeah,
we'd really appreciate it.
It's possible for us to make more podcasts. It takes a lot of time. We enjoy it so much to do it. But we also have, regular jobs to pay the bills, and our dream is to be able to do this full time.
Yeah, this is our full time. This will be our full time.
Baby steps towards that dream, and we want to make more episodes and continue to share it with you. So that would be great. Actually, I realized when we talk about it, we haven't even explained what Patreon actually is. So
it's like a support site where you can support a business or
artist or
an artist or whatever
that makes something
with I guess like monthly donations. Could be like from $1 and upwards.
Yeah.
Right. So anything would be great. We would be so thankful, and you would be thankful because we're doing this for you.
Yeah, and it actually gives it's a good feeling sometimes to actually help the things you care about. So if you're listening to us and you care about us, but I mean seriously, it's a good thing to contribute to the things that matters to you. So
that will help them grow.
We're not asking you to pay unless you actually want to see this podcast grow and unfold into what it's about to become.
Infinite greatness.
Yes.